Cheryl Lynch here, and we're back for the embellished folded fiber books. So today what I'd like to do is I would like to share with you how I do a mixture of scenes, and this is a photograph I had in my mind, but it really wasn't an actual photograph to use, so I had to combine several different photos to get this scene. So this is the barge. We did a bike and barge trip. So this is the barge we rode on. And this is the canal. And we lived on the barge. There were little rooms with little beds. And that's where we slept and we ate. And then in the morning, we would get off the barge and ride our bike to the next place. And the barge would meet us there. And then we would have dinner. So we rode through all kind of canals in Holland to many, many different cities. So I wanted a picture that showed us on the canal with the bridges, because to get from one side of the canal to the other, there are many, many bridges, and I didn't actually have a photo of that. But I did have a photo of the boat. So here was my photo that I took of our boat called the LOD. So I printed that, and I printed it about what size I thought I wanted the barge to be. And then I traced it with my tracing paper. Again, I only wanted the essential details so that it would be recognizable as a barge. And then this would be the canal bridge that we were going under. There'd be water here because we were on the canal. So I didn't have the little canal houses up here in the same photo, but I did have a photo of the canal houses. So then I knew that I could combine these with the bridge to get what I needed. So it would be the houses and then the barge. So first I took the barge, went over it with the Sharpie marker after I traced it, and then I knew I could copy it. And remember, when you're doing fusible applique, you have to trace the wrong side so that when you flip it, it becomes the right side. And I wanted the barge to look like it was coming out of the canal, coming towards you. Now, I had the option of recreating the canal houses out of fabric, but I thought that was just way too much work for what I wanted to do. I mean, I want to finish this book in a week, not in a year. So I decided to use a photo of the canal houses with the boat and to get that look. So I printed the canal houses on a piece of the pre-treated fabric for printing. So to start then, I took my batting. Remember, I always start with batting. I don't have a backing on it. So there is my batting. Then I'm going to take my photo of the canals. I just have to take off this little hard plastic piece. There you go. And I'm going to lay that on the backing. So there, that's done. That was the easiest canal houses I ever made. And then I just stitched around them just to get a little bit of dimension. And then it was time to put the barge on. So here's the two photos. Underneath the canal, it was dark, so I used this brown for my darkness. And I made my bridge out of pretty traditional fabric, but it happened to work. And this was the railing of the bridge. And here was the water. So the only thing missing at that point was my barge. So what I did is I wanted to put my barge together before I put it on the piece. So I used a piece of parchment paper and pre-assembled my barge. So this is all fused, you see, it's stuck on there. But the wonderful thing about parchment paper is, look, I could peel it right off. So that's my fusible applique all put together. And then I stuck it. Actually, the water goes on top of the barge. And there you go. There's the barge coming out. And so then I stitched around everything in order. And there was my finished block. So sometimes it's okay to combine photorealism and applique, and you get a great effect. And you get that realistic part. So that's how I made my canal boat page. So now that I have you here, I thought I would show you one more page. This is actually want to show you the cover of the book. So when I do the covers, I think it's fun to do a fun little edge. So this is definitely a very Delft looking house. Delft is the pottery that they make in Holland. And we went to the factory where Delft was made, and it is traditionally blue and white. They had some other stuff that wasn't blue and white, but when you think of Delft, you do think of blue and white. So now, I thought it would be fun to do something a little different than I've done before, and I decided to do thread sketching to put my windows in. So how would you do that? How would you know where to stitch? So that I took a drawing. I made a drawing of one of the canal houses, a very crude drawing, you can see. And then I scanned it on my printer. I have a 3-in-1, and I blew it up. And I ended up with something like this, although I have to say this is a little modification. So this is the template pattern for my canal house. And you can see it's got the windows in it, and then it's got the bands because I wanted to document, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So how was I going to know where the windows go? I didn't want to fuse them on. I could have used a blue marker, one of those blue washable markers, but I couldn't find mine. So what I did was I ended up using this it's called, it's a water-soluble stabilizer. And you see it's see-through. It's clear. You can see through it. And it disappears. It dissolves in water. So it disappears in water. So what I did is I took a piece of it. I laid it on top of my drawing. And then traced around it with a blue marker. And I have found in experience, because I have used this before, that you're better off using a color marker that's similar to what your thread color is going to be. Because if I did this with black marker and not all of it disappeared, I might see little black spots. So I try and match the marker to my thread. So now that I have my stitching pattern, I take that, and here's my batting. Remember, I always start with a piece of batting. Here's a piece of white fabric. I decided to use white as my background. And then I took my water-soluble piece of whatever, water-soluble, and I pinned it to my backing and my fabric. Then I dropped the feed dogs on my machine, and I put on my free motion quilting foot, and I stitched around and stitched around and stitched around all the different pieces. I left my threads there, and I put grids in the window. So, and I did the outline so I knew where to cut the piece, so I had the outlines. And then when you're done, guess what? It rips right off. So most of it rips off. It'll rip off. But all those little pieces, all the little squares inside the windows, it would take forever for you to get those off. So after I ripped most of it off, I soaked it in water. And it all disappeared. And I took all my threads and pulled them to the back. and I was on the way to my finished block. So now I wanted to put a bicycle in there, so I had this handy dandy bicycle stamp, and I just inked it and put the bike there. Because remember, we're not making masterpieces, we're making mementos. So could I have stitched that little bicycle? I probably could have stitched it by hand with embroidery floss, but I'd still be working on it. So I thought a stamp was a fun option. And then I wanted to document what the book was about. So I took, remember when I told you that I use my computer a lot as a design tool? So I found a font that I liked, and this is very light, I'm not sure you can see it. And I printed it out, so 2012 Holland, and I wanted it backwards, so if you do it in word art, you can get it backwards. And it was so light I did have to go over it with a marker so that I could see it through my fusible web. So I put all those onto fusible web and then iron them onto the back of this great blue fabric. And there I got all my letters. So I put 2012 on it and a section of that fabric and put Holland, and I blanket stitched around it all, and then I fused that section onto the front of the book and blanket stitched around that, and that's how I got the cover of my book. So that's the last page, and next time I will review how I put my book together. So I hope you come back.